Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to another class. Let me check if everything is working fine. So I avoid some problems I had before to be like talking for a long time and then, oh, let me move the mic to a better position. Hello, hello, testing, testing. Let me see here. The sound is good. Give me a second. I avoid some problems I had before to be like talking for a long time and then, oh, let me move the mic to a better position. Yeah, the sound is a little bit low, but I'll speak louder. Give me a second. Okay, cool. Well, thank you. So let's go. In the today's class, we will keep solving question. And just a reminder, my goal here is not to teach you like Python only. I am using Python as the first language to teach some fundamental concept in coding. So everything I'm bringing here is kind of the foundation. Today will be like a very simple question, but it's something that every engineer must know because we need to kind of avoid some mistakes. And then in some point, I will show how we can do in Python that is a little bit different. So sometime I will show the generic way that we can do that to work in any program language. That is what I expect everyone to know. And sometime a trick that, oh, we can do different this. So pay attention to this. So the today question is read two integer numbers and swap the variables content. So basically is we're gonna read two numbers, A and B, and then number one, number two, and then we'll remember we have two variables. Each one has a value. And we'll change those values. So the content of A will be B, content of B will be A. I will do in a way to help you to understand some principles in coding that is kind of similar to what we have in the real life. Okay, so let's go there. First, if this is an interview or is a requirement, make sure that you clarify. In this case, like really two integer numbers. So it's cool. Two integer. Well, if it was really two numbers, we should identify what type. So this one is clear. And swap the variables content. That is interesting to see because it's not just print the different content. We want that after we read the numbers, we'll do something, our process will change those variables. So let's go back to our basic thing. We have here like our code, our program. We'll have the input. What will be the input in this case? Two numbers. I can call here number one, oops, and number two. And that is the interesting thing. What should be the output? What should we print? That is funny. It would be the same number one and number two. However, the user want to see that whatever was in the number one now is in the number two. Whatever was in the number two now is in number one. So how this would happen in our program? Like how can we do that? So let you think, okay, imagine that we know that in this case, we will need like two variables. Let's call here, oops, sorry. I think I cannot put a box in another one. Let's see how I do this. Let's see if there's a container. Fine. Okay, let's see if this is going to work. We have this guy that will be our code, and here I want to just put no. No, let's do this. This is our program. So we'll have like one variable that we'll call number one and another variable that we'll call number two. Number one is this. And then number two will be this one here. It's very important to understand this because we'll need to use this later on a lot. We'll learn some more advanced thing like that we need to swap things. Okay, believe me that this is very important to understand. This is number 2. So we know how to read variables from the keyboard. So the user can type, for example, here 5 and this one 10. Our goal is to get those contents and swap them. So after this is with the input, after we finish our code, 10 should be here and 5 should be here. So let's just start by, okay, let's do the reading first. This part we already know. So we can call here number 1. And this we get from the keyboard, a int. And then we can say input where you can say number 1. I will copy and paste. Be very careful when doing copy and paste because it's very easy to forget something. So we have those two things. Now I have those variables like this. Someone could mistakenly think, oh, what if I do this? Number 1, receive number 2, number 2, receive number 1. And then we can say, okay, let me print here first. Let's print something like this. It will be a format string, and we can say number 1 will be equals to the variable number 1, and number 2, number 2 will be equals to the number 2 will be equal to the variable number 2. So whatever we do, when we print again, we should see it change. So if we are telling this to a human, the human understands what we do, but the computer is dumb. Whatever you tell him to do, he'll do. So he'll say, okay, get the content of number 2 and assign to number 1. So look what to do. Let the content of number 1 and assign, number 2 and assign to number 1. So this will happen. And now get the content of number 1 and assign to number 2. So we would end up with something like this. So it's very important to understand why we need to be careful about how to give instruction to a computer. It cannot understand, at least until now. Maybe in the future it will be different, but we are far away from that yet. So let's just make sure that this is, imagine that you do this, and remember, doesn't matter how good you are, how smart you are, you have to test your code. So let's put that same example here, like 5 and then 10. And then I'll see, okay, 5 and 10 and then 10 and 10. Let's put a breakpoint just to see what is going on. It's very simple, but I want you to really understand this. I'll put the number 5, I'll hit enter, and then I'll put the number 10, I'll hit enter, and now I stop here. Do you see the two variables in memory there? Number 1 is 5, number 2 is 10. When do we do this? Number 1 will receive what is in number 2. We receive 10. And now we say number 1, receive number 10. And then we print. So this is a bug. So why this bug happened? Because whoever did this code didn't pay attention to the details. When I was giving this class in a classroom, I was giving some example. Okay, we have a glass of milk and a glass of coffee. And I want you to swap the content. How you do? Would you get like the coffee and pour on top of the milk? No, it's kind of what we will do here. So if we want to change that content, we'll need a third glass. So we get the milk, we pour in that empty glass, then we get the coffee, put in this glass now that is empty, and then we get the other glass and you put back here. So to change the containers to like vessel or to glass, we need a third one to use like the auxiliary thing. It's the same idea in coding. What we need to do is, let's do this, say, okay, first I need to get one of them, I could choose N1, and put in an auxiliary variable. For example, number 1. Once number 1 is saved, I will get number 1 and say, okay, now I can say number 1 will receive number 2. Would be something like this. Let's go back to the original example. We have this and this. What we did is we create a third variable. Oops. Call aux, the auxiliary or backup or whatever name you like. Most of the thing I see in code is this, aux. So aux will receive number 1. Aux will receive exactly what is there, like 5. So we have a copy of number 1. Now that you have a copy of number 1, we can say, okay, number 1 will receive number 2, because now we can put the number 2 here because we have a copy. So that will be like the third glass. Now that you have the copy, you can say, okay, now number 2 will receive that copy. Number 2 will receive the copy. So now we get this content and we put here. So this way we change the container to variables. So this is the universal way to do this. Okay? We use a third variable to do that. So now let's test. Remember, if you want to be a good software engineer or a programmer or developer, you have to make sure that you validate what you did. Doesn't matter how smart you are, you do mistakes. Okay? So let's run this. Let's test. I will put 5 and 10. And let's see what happened now. See, I have 5 and 10 there. Number 1 has 5, number 2 has 10. I will step over. Now I have a new variable, aux, that has the same content as number 1. It's a copy. Of course, with the glass of milk, we had to pour something there. But in this case, no, it's just a copy. Then I will say number 1 will receive number 2. So now that we have a copy of number 1, I can safely put another content there. So I get number 2 and I will put in number 1. So now I have 10 on both. However, as I have a copy of the previous value of number 1, I can save in number 2. So I will bring this back to number 2. Not back, I will bring that to number 2. So now the two variables are reversed. So I print number 1 was 5, number 2 was 10, and now I will print again. So number 1 is 10, number 2 is 5. I think it's better if I do this. Number 1 equals 2. Number 2 equals 2. Cool. So this is a universal way to do this, swap two variables, that would work in any programming language. However, Python and some other new language that's more like they call functional program. We'll learn about this later on, but for now, Python has a cool way to do this without using an auxiliary variable. This is particular of Python. So instead of this, let's just comment all those lines. So I make all those lines like comments. We'll do what they call a Pythonic way. People like to do this. Oh, this is the way that you do stuff in Python. There is many things that we can do different because Python was designed with an intention to be simpler than all the other languages that exist in that time. And what we could do is to do something like this. Number 1, comma, number 2 will receive number 2, comma, number 1. In reality, it's like this. We are storing this temporarily in some memory, And then we assign this to this guy and this to this guy. It's like we had a temp auxiliary variable. So let's put a breakpoint here just to try to understand this. Not all language has this idea. Now it's funny. Let me just explain you something about programming language. When one language brings something that is really cool, the other like language developer, they evaluate that. Oh, it's a good idea, so let's bring that as well. That happen all the time. Something that was first only in Python, then came to Java, came to C#. When a new language is created, for example, Scala or Kotlin, it is on top of Java, bring things from Python, from C#. So is that why the programming language itself is not the big deal today? Because they are all converging. Of course, depending on what you're gonna do. For example, if you want to work specifically for iPhone, you have to use a language that works in iPhone. You want to work specific in, maybe you want to be a kernel contributor for Linux, you have to work C, or maybe now Rust that they are using for some little things there. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that don't get stressed, oh, what language I'm learning. As long as you are learning the fundamentals, you can easily translate that to any other programming language. So when you see people with discussion about which programming language is better, go there to learn, because everyone will give the good points of the highlights of every language, but there is no such thing. It's like that discussion, what is better, a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, a Porsche or a Mercedes? So they all are good. If you are a good driver, you go get wherever you want, okay, where you need to go. So we have this breakpoint here. Let's save and run. So let's use this. Oh, another thing. I'm using 5 and 10 all the time here because was that example. But when you are doing your test, in this case it's silly, but avoid to use always the same value because they could mask some bugs that only appear with different values. So it's good to very often change 1 and 2, 10 and 5. So in this case, doesn't matter, but it's just to open your mind that when you are testing, try to be a little bit unpredictable. Like put different inputs to see if that will affect. In this case, it's not, but it's just to give you some tips. So 1 and 2. So what happened? Variable number 1, number 1 has 1, number 2 has 2. And now we are doing this great thing. We are telling Python, do you know, we want to assign 2 values at the same time. I want to assign something to value 1, something to value 2. And this is what we want to assign. Whatever was in number 2, whatever was in number 1. So that is something that is particular for some language. So what you're going to do is, it's kind of, imagine that we have this situation. Number 1 is 1. Number 2 is 2. We don't have the auxiliary anymore. But when we get those 2, like let me do something like here. When we say, okay, here. Number 1, comma, number 2, will receive number 2, comma, number 1. So when this happens, it's like Python create a copy here, or let's create a copy of number 2 here. Let's create a copy of number 1 here. And now let's do this. Let's finish this by using the same position. We'll get this guy, and then we put here. We'll get this guy, and we'll put here. So actually, we have like not just 1 copy, but 2 copies. But no one cares. Oh, you are using 1 extra space in memory. That is not a big deal. So look what happened. Number 1 is 1, number 2 is 2. The next line, they just swap because we did this. So this is the Pythonical way to do it, or any functional programming language. So you can do this in Scala, in Kotlin. I guess even Java and C# now, they changed that this is allowed. Okay? But the classical way to change two variables is using a third variable. And I want to make sure that you understand why. Because as soon as you say number 1 receive number 2, whatever was in number 1 is lost because we are doing a new value. Is that why you need to use a third variable? So I even put a comment here. Pythonic way. Okay, so I hope everything is clear, because this is everyone that went to university, went to college, that did like a formal training. This was explained to them, because later on we'll need this knowledge to solve other algorithms. For example, when you learn about sorting, there is a lot of swapping. And then you have to understand this concept, why we need a auxiliary variable to do the swapping. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Oh, let's finish our code doing the printing, and then like number 1 is 2, number 2 is 1. Cool? Okay. Let's go to the next question now. Let's go here and to the question number 16. Let me clean this up. Oops, and let's go. So question 16 states, read the duration of experiment in seconds and calculate the duration in hours, minutes, and seconds. So this is something very common. We have to translate from a unit to a different one. So what you learn here, you apply in many different things. Okay, for example, we could translate from kilometers to centimeters. The same thing. We have to figure out how to do the calculation. And this one is good because we have to practice something that is, I would say, the most uncommon knowledge we had before we start to code about math that we must know. Okay, so let's go. The idea is read the duration of experiment in seconds. So someone is saying, oh, this experiment took X seconds, 1,000, 3,000, 15,000 seconds, 1,731 seconds. And now I want to create a report or something. Imagine that I use some chronograph that was giving me only in seconds. And I need now to make more human understand, because if I tell you, oh, do you know, this experiment took 15,375 seconds. You say, how long is that? Because our mind, we are not used to calculate time in just seconds. We only use seconds like for 60. Every time we have 6 seconds, become 1 minute. Would be way easier to understand if I said, oh, the experiment took like 3 hours, 10 minutes, and 35 seconds. You have a good idea what that will take. Imagine that you call your girlfriend or your boyfriend and say, oh, do you know, I will be at your home in 3,565 seconds. She or he will say, what? I have no idea how long I have to get ready for you. So this is the idea. It's very common to do something like this. Let me clean this up. So we need to use the tools that we learned so far. That is the main idea of coding. I like to give a analogy about, oh, you are like you work fixing car. But if you are in your office, you have like hundreds of thousands of tools. So if you need to replace a brake or do something, you already have all the specific tools to do that. It's like us solving something in real world. You can just do some math and we can find that. But when we are coding, we have to adapt our solution to whatever tools is compatible with the coding world. So I consider like coding being a mechanic that now has to fix the same car with a limited set of tools. Just a plier, a screwdriver. So look, the problem is the same, but now he has to be smart. I would say not smart, but he has to adapt his mind to understand how can I use instruction that a dumb thing can execute it. I like to give another example why coding sometimes is hard. Imagine that you are a doctor and then you get a phone call from someone, for example, a soldier is in the battlefield and someone is injured. And then he have to give instruction how to deal with that situation. The doctor could not talk with the soldier the same way he is talking with another doctor or maybe a nurse. He would have to adjust the content, what he is going to say. The same thing as coding. We need to adjust our dialogue to a language that the computer can follow. That's why we are learning Python here. The doctor have to explain something in simple terms so the soldier could understand and do the procedure. Imagine that a nurse was there and something happened that she was not used to. She calls to a doctor. The doctor can just maybe mention, oh, do this technique, do that, because she knows that she already has some knowledge about that. Or imagine that too is one doctor, but is a little bit different field, and he called just to say, oh, I never did this procedure. Could you explain? Remember, it will be way shorter because we don't need to break down in so many little clear details. So coding is all about that. We need to find out how to translate whatever we need to do with those basic operations that we learn. So let's see if I find a nice way to explain this. So let's do something like this. Imagine that, let me change here the format, the line to be a little bit thicker. So something like this. So let's try to do this visually. So we make something like this. Is how long was my experiment? In seconds. Okay, let's do this. Seconds. So what you need to do now is we have to break down an hours, hours, minutes, and seconds. Oops. So, okay, imagine here that, for example, we have something like 4,521 seconds. How do we separate this in how many hours, how many minutes, and how many seconds? So we would think, well, remember that 1 hour is like 60 minutes, 1 minute is 6 seconds. Whoever created this time thing, calculate this way. So we need to figure out, okay, with this amount of seconds, how do I find how many hours we can fit there? Because remember, hours is more than seconds, or the minutes, and minutes is more than seconds. Just for our understanding, we can say, okay, 1 hour is 60 minutes. And 1 minute is 6 seconds. And 1 second is 1 second. Okay? So let's think here. Let me just move this here a little bit. Let's try to think, okay, what kind of operation could I do to get this? Imagine that this line here represent all those seconds. So we will need to do, okay, how many seconds is 1 hour? So if 1 hour is 60 minutes and 6 minutes is 6 seconds, we could think, okay, 1 hour is equals to 60 multiplied by 6 seconds. Does that make sense? So if you want to know, okay, if every hour is 6 minutes and every minute is 6 seconds, we just multiply that. For every minute here, I have to add 60 seconds. So how much is 60 vezes 60? We don't need to do math. We can just use calculators here. I want to do in a way that you don't feel, oh, I need to know math. No, you don't need to do math in your mind. It's like a good mathematician is not the one that do math on the mind. It's the one that know how to prepare the equation. So it will be like 60 multiplied by 60. Of course I knew, but it will be 3,600. What I'm trying to tell you is that to do coding, you don't need to be any good in math. You just need to know the basic operation, because everything else you can ask, you can figure out. Unless you go, for example, work for NVIDIA or work for like a game industry, you have to, or even now AI and artificial intelligence, a lot of statistics. So there are a lot of fields in software engineering that if you are good in math, you can exceed it. You can just like make good money on it, high payment on that. But you do like a regular software engineer, 80% of the jobs out there, you just need to know the basic operation, percentage, and integer division. So what we could think is, okay, from here, we like to see, okay, how many 3,600 we can fit here. Imagine that this value we don't know. We'll get some value later on, but let's say, okay, this is the encoding. We can say, okay, imagine that this is 3,600 seconds. Our idea is how many 3,600 seconds we can fit here. Because if we know this, we'll know, okay, this means how many hours we have here. Which operation give us that? The integer division, because exactly this. If I get this big number and I say, oh, please give me the integer division of this by 3,600, we'll discover how many hours we have. And do you agree that not always will be exact math? Sometimes there is a leftover here. Then we have to figure out, okay, from this leftover, how much we have there. So imagine that this leftover here is like this size. And then this leftover will be less than 3,600. But in that 3,600, we say, okay, how many seconds will be here? So then we do a integer division by 60, because how many times we find like 60 here will be how many minutes. And then the leftover, like wherever we are. So if there is just a little bit of leftover, or like this, imagine that, let me do this a little bit better. reduce this a little bit. Let's see if this will be better. So imagine that we can fit 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and then the laser left is here. That is less than 3,600. See, is less. So imagine that is something like this. So now you say, okay, here, how many 60 can we fit? So imagine that now we go here and say, okay, 60, we can have, for example, 1, we can have 2, maybe 3, and then there is a little bit of leftover here. And this leftover will be how many seconds? So actually, we're going to do a series of division. The first one will be by 3,600. So we know how many hours. We get the quotient. And then we have the remainder that we can say, okay, now the remainder of this, I will do again by 60. And then the quotient will be how many minutes? And the remainder will be how many seconds? And remember, if you get something like this in your day, don't get desperate. You're going to have some help. Oh, let me see here. Okay. So let's go there. Now that we have some idea, let's prepare. And here we could ask, is this seconds is an integer or could be a fraction? Imagine that no, it's just seconds because it was not specified, and you confirm it is like that. So we could say something like that. Experiment seconds. What is wrong here? Experiment. I will say like this. What is wrong here? Experiment. Usually does give you... No. Let me check Google here. Experiment. No. Experiment. No, it's correct. So experiment seconds. So this is the full amount, the input. We'll get a int that will say an input of the text. You're going to say, okay, experiment duration. And we can do something like this, seconds. Cool? So now we say, okay, we have this experiment in seconds. What we can do is, okay, let's calculate how many hours we can fit in those all seconds. So we can say that hours will be equals to that experiment seconds. And here comes the first lesson that we have to remember. If I do this, divide by, I could put like 3,600, or if I want to be like, okay, 60 multiplied by 60. Could be this as well. In this case, I would prefer to put like 3,600, and maybe we could put a comment. 1 hour has 3,600 seconds. So now that we know how many hours we need for this, we got this. In this case, like it will be like 3 hours. But there is still some seconds that we know that is less than 3,600, because if this was equal or more, we would have another hour. So now we have to figure out from this left over, we need to figure out what is that left over. So look, first let's see what was the problem here. Let's see if you remember. This is a mistake that probably every engineer once did it, because it's kind of one language in a way, another language different way. So in Python, look, if we run this, let's see what's gonna happen. We do this, and then let's type 5,000, 5,531. So look, we'll calculate how many hours now. It was the last line, so let's just do this. Print hours, so then we can stop there. Let me run. Yeah, I'll put the breakpoint here, it's better. So let's put like 5,531. And look, now we're gonna calculate the number of hours. See, hours was 1.25 because we did the float division. When we put like 1/ for Python, we are not doing an integer division. So this is something that we have to understand. Java, C#, other program language, depending on the type of the operation, this will be a float or integer division. In Python, no. In Python, if you remember, if we go here, when we are learning about basic operation, I guess was math, we learn about integer division. And this was a warning. Explain the operation, use the drawing. Because integer division, we have to use //. So this is the first pitfall that we all may do. But now that you learn about this, when you do this mistake, you will figure out. When you test, you see right away, oh, this is not. So is that why it's very important for us to test? When we put like // we are telling Python, oh, we want an integer division between those two numbers. So let's save and run again. So now when I put here like 4,531, what I told you, no, let's use different values. 5,123. So when I do this calculation, I will see, oh, only 1 hour fits there. Let's run again, and let's put like a big number because it's 3,600. So let's put here like 31,672. So we're gonna get 31,000 and divide by 3,600. So that will be 8 hours. But we don't know yet how many minutes and seconds. So then we have to prepare for that. So we can call here reminder, for example, or reminder. That will be experiment in seconds. Now, instead of division, we'll get the mod. Remember here, math, we say, oh, integer in mod. So I already explained this. Hello, so want to learn Python, how many days will it take? Oh my God. Depends how much you want to learn about Python. If you're already a coder in other language, take a few days. If you never did coding before, I'd say easily 60 hours if you are like a very fast-paced learner. But to be a professional, to go to the market, I'd say around 1,000 hours, maybe 2,000, if you want to be like a software engineer. Because any programming language, just the language, you can learn in a few weeks if you know how to do coding. The way that I'm going here, for example, I have the same training in Portuguese, and I already have 220 classes. And we already learned a lot of things there. Like if everyone that is following that course, could claim that is already a coder. So I'd say that if you are dedicated person, in the next couple months, you can say, oh, I know how to do code in Python, because we're going to learn a lot of stuff, because it's not like no Python. You need to know object oriented. You need to know data structure. You need to know like how to do testing, how to use Git. We'll learn all this here. Okay. So yeah, Zach just asked that. How long it take to? Many days. Well, I'd say that in hours will be easily 60 hours if you are already kind of good in coding. If not, you're fresh, just a young guy try to learn and learn a professional. I would say 1,000 hours. Okay. So now that we have the reminder that is this piece, we will apply the same logic. So now the same logic will be minutes, will be the reminder divided by 60. Because what we did, we tried to get how many hours, and then with the leftover, I can call this guy here, I guess, leftover. I think will be better. Oh, let me do it this way. Right click, rename, leftover. You are 23. So yeah, so in 24, you can be a professional already. And I promise you that I will carry this course until there. You can check my channel. There is a course in, like, if you want to see the material, you can learn a lot there, because there I speak in Portuguese. Everything in writing is in English. So just to let you know, if we go here and you do codando.live, you go into this page, and if we scroll down, everything is in Portuguese, and down below here there is a table with all the class that we had. Every 200 all class. And if you click in any of those class, you go to the video, or you can go here and see the material. Like there is this file here where I'm explaining everything I'm doing there. So yeah, if you're looking a free way to learn the coding, like with a university degree quality, you found the place. So now that we have the minutes, we'll say, okay, now let's see how many seconds was the leftover. So it will be the leftover mod mod 60. So now we can print something like this. I'll format a string and say the experiment, or we can just say like something like this, hours, and then the word hours, minutes, and the word minutes, and then seconds, the container variable second, and the word seconds. Or maybe even better, we can do something like this. We can just separate by, let's do this first, and then we can change. Okay, let's save. And then what you do, run again, and let's try. We put like 31,672. And then you get this 31,672. We divide by 3,600, and then how many hours we have? 8. From those 8 hours, let's see what is left over. The leftover is still 2,872. And now we're gonna see, okay, in those 2,872, how many minutes? We divide by 60, so 47 minutes. And having those 47 minutes, how many seconds left? Pay attention that this number will never be 60 or above, because if it was 6 or above, it will be 1 more hour. And this one will not be 6 or above, because if that was true, it will be 1 extra minute. We never say, oh, it's 5 hours and 62 minutes. We would say like 7 hours and 2 minutes. Do you know my point? So, and now you print, and then we have to confirm. Oh, we print the 8 hours, 7 minutes, and 52 seconds. Or we could say, okay, instead of print this way, we can confirm. Oh, how do you want to print? Because maybe it could be something like this. As we usually see time, we do things like this. So if you run again, and we put some amount there, 45,612. And then we do the calculation, and then we print. This, who you define, is the person that is giving you the requirement. Probably here, as they didn't give an example, you don't know, so it's good to ask. If you are in an interview or you are working, you can ask, oh, how do you want me to give you the result? It's very important to have that mindset. Okay, make sure that you confirm exactly how the details. Cool. So are we happy? Maybe, but what we can do? Okay, let's do something here just to make sure that we are not like miss something. Let's do this, and let's go to Copilot and see if he can help us. As everyone is saying that like, oh, those things will replace us. There is a lot of wipe there, so don't buy that thing. Now is the best time ever to learn how to do coding. And you can say, okay, I need to test a program I created to calculate the duration of an experiment in hours, minutes, and seconds, where the input is the duration in seconds. Could you give me some values to test if my program is correct? Let's see what you're gonna do. So this is good, but remember, every time I ask, there is some bugs in the middle, so don't blindly test it. If you are working in a company, probably as part of your work requirement, you get what should be the input and should be the output, and then you have to test with that. Never ever in your life write some code, do a quick test and say it's okay. If you do that, you're not going to be a good coder. We have to have the mindset, I build it, let me try to break so I can find bugs before the user find it, because when the user find, there's a price to pay. The user, like the price to pay is sometimes you have to go there in the middle of midnight or someone else. The customer is less confident, your company can lose money. So is that why it's very important to check. So let's see some example. This was a good example because they said, okay, let's see the just 1 hour. Let me remove this just to speed up. Yeah, 1 hour, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. Okay, awesome. Let's do again, and 3,661. So that means you'll be 1 hour, 1 minute, and 1 second. Very clever. Oh, very easy to calculate. And now 7,322. That will be like 2 hours, 2 minutes, 2 seconds. Okay, cool. And we should not be lazy and not be afraid to find our own books. If you don't find, someone else will find. There is even a quote. In code is like, do your coding like whoever is going to fix your bugs is a psycho that knows where you live. It's just something that we have to pay attention to what we do. So now let's go to this one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I did something wrong. was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, it's right. Look, 3 hours, 25 minutes, 45 seconds. And then the other one will be 9,061. No, 90,061. So that will be 25 hours, 1 minute, 1 second. So when you do this in your work, we have to collect the evidence, and maybe you can put in your test, like we will learn how to do that. Oh, this is how to test our code. And then we make a program to run those and compare the results. Because then if someone change your code, you can make sure that you're going to capture that. So my goal here was just to show you that sometimes we need to use math, but it's not complicated at all. It's simple. If you didn't get this, just review, watch again, and then we'll clarify. This kind of thing will need a lot. There is a lot of programs, there is a lot of solutions that need to understand this integer division. And we should not do the pitfall to do the float division. Cool? Well, thank you for watching this class. I hope you can get it. And see you next class. See you. Bye. Peace and God bless you.